Good evening and welcome to the Whiskey Wednesday edition. Coming to you live, our returning special co-host Ravi and the ninja, Dr. Jason Pittman. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. Is it good? Is it bad? What is even the definition? I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Gentlemen, cheers to Whiskey Wednesday. I don't know what you all are drinking, but I'm drinking a
I had
Rabbit
vodka. I finished it.
Oh, you finished it. Well, maybe that's because you had your director of communications listening in tonight. I don't know.
Oh, no pressure.
Hey,
Definitely no pressure.
What month are we in?
This is September.
Prost.
Cheers. Post.
Nastarovia.
Oh man, you gotta say it.
So
Prost.
Jason and I have spoken, tangentially about imposter syndrome, but I really wanted to focus quite a bit on and more in depth a little bit about it because I don't know that many people necessarily understand what it is. So I'll just start it off with the definition from, Google, because basically anything Google, I believe. So it's the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. And so to me, it's basically kind of going, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Even though I have done all of these things that would say, yeah, I deserve and have earned a seat at the table.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I would encapsulate that. You tell me if you agree or disagree with this. That imposter syndrome is largely construed as I'm a fraud. I don't belong where I'm at.
Yeah.
I've not achieved what I've achieved based on merit. I've achieved it through some deception, willfully or unwillfully. I'll add to this because at least my perspective is that this is not an official DSM diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is not a manifestation of a pathology.
Well, I mean, it is technically considered a psychological disorder, but you've got to be diagnosed with it. I don't know that I'd go so far as to say that I personally would think that I would represent the psychological disorder. But I mean, I might. I don't know.
Not the one I would pick for you, dude.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of them around. But this is what I felt that was somewhat interesting is the people that are somewhat, we'll just say, famous, that self-proclaim that they are also suffer from imposter syndrome. Sheryl Sandberg.
Wow.
David Bowie. An interesting one to me, which is very, I don't understand why she would think this, but Serena Williams, she's won how many Wimbledons?
Gotta be kidding me.
Yep. She says, now maybe it's because she was the younger sister and Venus was winning all these things before her. I don't know, but she self-proclaims. Howard Schultz, who was the CEO at Starbucks. Tina Fey.
Wow, that's quite
Maya Angelou.
Oh my God.
Ariana Huffington, Lady Gaga, Natalie Portman. I don't understand. This one also is very baffling to me. And I always brutalize her last name, so one of you can correct me. But Sonia Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, she says she suffers from imposter syndrome. And then, Tom Hanks. Those are some famous people that say, nope, I don't know that I deserve a seat at the table.
So let me ask you two a question based on that list and the idea of how this manifests, right? Do you think people that aren't on that list, let's take the three of us, for instance, or those that are even less famous than us, because if nothing else, we have this show, right? I mean, so that affords us a degree of fame that other people don't have. However you construe that, it's true.
I will have you know that you could Google me before this show, and I still showed up quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Do you think people of zero notoriety manifest imposter syndrome, or does imposter syndrome only manifest in people of notoriety? It's an honest question. I don't know. I'm curious about that.
I don't think it has anything to do with notoriety. I think that there's an underlying insecurity that is manifest in people, and Dan and I were chatting about it earlier. That I think that if you learn and you experience and you gain some proficiency and you pursue education and you realize that no matter how much you learn, there's going to be this infinity of knowledge. And I work in an industry where the longer you work, the more you realize how little you know. I work in construction. So like there is no such thing as knowing construction, right? It's just that it's just learning every day, and you're always learning, and you realize there's a humility that goes with that. Like you can get humbled very easily on construction projects. You can think that, oh, I had a successful day or a successful month or a successful project, but then you realize that there's an old saying in construction, you're only as good as your last project or your last screw up. And so there's a certain insecurity that goes with that, maybe. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I think you're kind of onto something, because I don't believe you have to be famous or well known. I kind of break people down in this aspect as there are people that are talented and never live up to their potential. And so they don't suffer from imposter syndrome. They just kind of believe it's going to work out, and I'm going to benefit. There are people that are perfectly okay with saying, I'm content, so they don't suffer from it. There are people that believe they're the underdog and therefore work hard. And then there's the people that they believe that they're the underdog and that they don't deserve to be in the same room. Therefore, they work even harder. And I actually think if we were to ask Michael Jordan this was the reason why he worked so hard that sophomore year of high school after he got cut. Right. He never wanted, and Kobe Bryant has said it, I'm never going to allow you to outwork me. The person that says that believes that I'm only on the top because no one else has noticed that this other person is better. So I'm going to keep working so they never notice it. And that could be a high school teacher. It could be, any teacher for that matter. It's just the personality of, to me, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like I believe I suffer from it. And I think it's what keeps me always wanting to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday.
You're grounded, right? You get grounded in a certain way.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it may not be that thing.
I think so. The list is largely bullshit, right? Because it only points to people of notoriety that we can somehow aspire to be, which robs us of our agency, of our own notoriety, as I would argue it. I think what creates this sense, at least as I can,
sorry to interrupt you, Ninja,
no,
but I think this could be a good research study for us to be able to do and then publish. And we take a look at people that are not in, say, the C-suite of organizations and find out. We are qualified.
Well, we are doctors. Well, it's interesting because
Robbie's really smart. Robbie's really smart.
Ravi talks about construction and the dynamicism of that environment, and I would draw parallels to cyber, which is a highly dynamic environment. And this is the point I would submit to us to consider, is that it's not the level of notoriety that engenders a sense of imposter. It is an exposure over time to chaos. And so
Gotcha.
psychologically, you would construe this as the domain of proximal development.
You nailed it. You nailed it, because construction and managing projects is really about managing chaos. On a good day, you might manage it just well enough, but at some point that chaos is going to get you, and you realize that, and that's an angst that you have to deal with.
That's right. Well, if you accept that call to action in mythological terms, Dan and I have talked about archetypes and Jungian psychology a bit, and this isn't my field of study, although it's a hobby of mine. Mythologically, there's a certain amount of times you can go approach that dragon before it eats you, and that dragon represents chaos.
Or I become the dragon.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. But that's why we bear the tattoos that we do, because we're manifesting that externally. And so in this zone of proximal development, if you're interested in furthering yourself as a human being, you have to withstand a measure of that so you can grow. You can't grow when you're content or safe.
Correct.
Right? You have to get exposed to that chaos or that dynamicism so that you can butt up against conflict and grow as a consequence of it.
If you don't overcome any kind of adversity, you never really grow, right?
That's right. That's right.
You need adversity.
The easiest thing in the world is to never try.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and you never grow if you don't try.
If you think about our concept of failure, so failure, there's a great saying that's out there. I mean, we've seen it. Failure and success are both imposters. I don't know who said it, but somebody famous said it. It's really two sides of the same coin.
Rudyard Kipling.
Rudyard Kipling from the poem "If," I believe.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So if you realize that, like, failure and success, I mean, what is that? It's if you ever saw that movie by Woody Allen, Match Point, it's just which way the ball bounces, but you still have to, from an Eastern point of view, and let's say if you go into Eastern philosophy or Hinduism, that clearly says the result of your action does not belong to you because there's too many variables, but all you control is your effort and your sincerity and your integrity, right? So that hopefully leads to enough good karmic goodwill and currency out there, right? But still, it's still not guaranteed.
Right. This is probably going to get us all flamed for me asking this question, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's an important question to this. Do you think women or other minorities suffer from imposter syndrome more so than men? Because when I read that list, like,
there was a lot of women.
How could Sheryl Sandberg, really? And I go, she's the chief operating officer of Facebook. Like, how could she suffer? Like, I just go, Serena Williams, Natalie Portman, like, these are people that have truly reached a pinnacle. And so I wonder, do women suffer from this more? And that and I would posit that, does our environment that we are in have more influence over whether or not we might have that self-doubt?
I'll go first, Ravi, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
That's a really fucking interesting question, man. My immediate reaction is,
you're welcome.
Yeah, right. I fucking miss you, dude. My immediate scientific reaction to that is I would hypothesize that women would report a higher rate of imposter syndrome because, if nothing else, they bear the burden of being mothers and temperamentally what that entails. Listen, man, we've been around women that have kids. That is a very high degree of chaos for a very long time.
And that's just one arm of their chaos. They're still also dealing with a personal relationship and a business relationship all at the same time.
Right. So what I'm trying to do is reduce it down to a core that's inescapable biologically. Whether you choose to have kids or not, I'm not judging. What I'm talking about is the biological imperative to be motherly temperamentally. And so if nothing else, there's that friction that's present there. And I've seen what that costs. and it's high, right? Man, that's a fucking good question, dude. I would have to guess that there's a reason why there was more women on that list than men, and I bet it's because of their temperament. Now you can ask, can women withstand a higher degree of chaos, as we construe that variably, than men? And I think that becomes highly variable depending on the field.
That's a good point. That's I think, Dan, you're onto something. I believe that earlier in my career, I had clients that were women in construction, which was rare. And in those days, talking about the early '90s, where women were not necessarily working for general contractors, but they were working on the owner's side or the architectural side or owner's reps. I found the women clients to be incredibly smart, and they had emotional intelligence. And the thing I loved was that everything was not about ego. And construction is a business that's largely, especially growing up in the industry, driven by ego. And I've seen ego destroy companies. I've seen it destroy projects. I've seen it put developers on the edge of failure. And I think that that's a tremendous sort of I think asset, at least something I've observed, that the humility that that women have had in business, that they have that self-reflection. They say, okay, I'm not. So maybe they're more honest about it.
I'm not. I mean, I honestly don't know the answer, but I tend to say they likely do. In terms of suffering from imposter syndrome, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Because I personally believe that you can take that and make it extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Which gets into the aspect of martial arts. Like, the stronger you come at me, I could redirect that, and the power is exponential, and as it reflects.
It's a very Tai Chi principle.
Yeah, very much so. And and I've noticed that men in general do very good with single focused tasks, and there might be many single focused tasks. We just become good at getting through them very, very quickly. But the women that I've been around, they truly can be doing much more multitasking than what we can as men. And I wonder, is it in general, are women more like that jacks of all trades, master of none, because they never are able, because of all of these competing things going on and the constant self-doubt? Is that why they don't get there? And when they do, like a Serena Williams or a Sheryl Sandberg, they're going, but I've got all these other things that are taking me away from this thing that I'm good at, and therefore they never believe they're that good because they've got all these other competing interests.
Well, that's another very good question. There's a book that was written recently called Range that argues that the future belongs to people that can assimilate and integrate knowledge from multidisciplinary points of view, essentially saying that the generalist owns the future, but we live in a society that rewards specialists. So we're also torn. That's one side of it, but the other side of it tells us that that who's that author? Malcolm Gladwell, who says you need 10,000 hours of proficiency to become really great at something. So which is it? Is it having range, where you have a broad exposure to a lot, or is it having the drill down capability of a PhD going into expertise? And I believe that it's really both, because if you're going to be an owner of a business or be entrepreneurial or run a project, you have to be a generalist. I tell my students, I used to tell them at NYU, and now I tell them at Fordham, that be careful. If you're an engineer and you want to go into project management, you have to accept one thing, that every year you'll get dumber and dumber and dumber technically, but you will have greater range. But you can't have both. It's like Heisenberg. You can know the momentum of a particle or the location, but you're not going to get both in this universe.
Right. Well, when you look at, like, we'll say jujitsu as an example, if you just focus on the straight jujitsu aspect, then if you're standing, you are limited. And in order to get to the ground, which is where your strengths are, could put you in a weaker position. So you have to round this out with wrestling, with judo, with some type of striking art in order to be able to do those things, because you want to always put yourself in a position of strength. And while your strength might be from starting from your back, you don't want to be put on your back in a way in which it's going to cause negative consequences. Like, I don't know, slammed as an example. Which, oh, by the way, Jason, we are at our 2-year anniversary of you slamming Michelle, because it showed up in my memories.
Well, the guy deserved it. I mean, listen, I was very calm. I was very acquiescing and non-escalating that situation. He persisted in it, and he got what he deserved.
Yeah. So Ravi, so you don't understand the situation there. I have 2 at that time potential Sith apprentices, Jason and Michelle, and they decided, because Michelle is like 6'5", 270 pounds, that he was going to challenge Jason, because he's on is it the History Channel or A&E in Night Fight? Like,
History.
He's doing like full contact medieval fighting and represented the United States team in Scotland.
He's a badass.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's a Marine captain. So he like challenged Jason to this thing, and he forgot or didn't realize that Jason was quite well versed in folk wrestling in Ohio, and did quite well through high school. And Jason's also built like a dwarf, so he has the center of gravity and
Look at that! Look at that!
Wow!
Fucking power!
So in the backyard, they decided to wrestle, and the ninja won.
Well,
And
listen,
on top of that, the next morning, the ninja and I showed up to work at 8:00 in the morning, and
we're professionals.
And then Michelle didn't show up till noon.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, he wants to provoke. He wants challenge. I accept that, man. But listen, man, dude, I'm fucking 45 years old, man. I was there trying to have a conversation over whiskey, and well, I don't like being touched, dude. I'd like don't push me and touch me, and it just got too much, and that was that. That was that. So if Ian ever wants to come on this show and defend himself in that instance, I mean, we have the video. I know you still have it.
Oh, I have it.
Yeah, no. Yeah. If he ever wants to come on and defend himself, he's more than welcome, because he dipped himself into that chaos and he got bit by the dragon.
Right, but that just goes in the aspects of while it is great to be an expert in one thing, I also look at this as like intellectual property, so like a patent. You may have a patent, but you better get all of those patents that support you around there, because you typically need 10 patents on that cover you on that sole subject. Martial arts is the same thing. I may be great in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I better have these other things covering me. No matter what it is, those pieces that circle it are important. And so I like to believe at this particular point in time, I'm a generalist in technology. I'm a generalist when it comes to business. But if you want to talk cybersecurity, I still feel that and networking are areas that I could say that I'm an expert in when it comes to technology.
Well, Robbie, you hit the nail, because as I was thinking about Dan's question, I was thinking to myself, the right answer is both. Although that's exceedingly rare to have somebody that has the ability to be both at the same time, because we tend to organize ourselves on this vertical hierarchy of ascendance, right? Like, you start at the beginning and you work your way up, and you dip into a little bit of chaos and friction, and iron sharpens iron. You get a little better, and the vast majority of people cap out at some point, and either they become content or they reach their capacity for one reason or another, or other variables enforce some limitation, right? The universe is hostile to us. But there are a select number of individuals that can ascend to the top of that hierarchy. And they're the top of that hierarchy, and they're the best. But then there's the super predators, the super apex individuals that can be at the top of that hierarchy and then transcend other hierarchies adjacent to it. And that's really what we're talking about, as I perceive it, as not only being both, but really the embodiment of where that imposter syndrome comes in. Because imagine this, I think about this sometimes, and Dan and I like to fantasize about our narcissism sometimes, right? And so if I move my camera over to the window, you can see I had a student make me a plaque that has my name and then it says Emperor of Mankind. Imagine what it would be like to be the Emperor of all mankind. And not all mankind.
I don't have to imagine.
See, this is what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm dealing with, Ravi, right?
Yeah, right. You guys are perfect foils for each other.
And so not just mankind, but imagine mankind that has populated the universe. Billions upon untold billions of individuals.
Like Captain Kirk, populating the universe.
Yeah.
That's right. And you are the emperor of mankind. Can you bear that burden?
I don't know if I want to deal. I'm barely the emperor of my own household.
That's right. Well said.
Well,
right?
I think there's an aspect of that question. Can you, should you, or are you capable of? Right?
Yeah, sure, right.
I think
what kind of hubris does that take to think that we know so much? And then why is this is not a mankind-centric universe. I mean, we live on a little blue dot in the middle of the edge of an obscure galaxy. There's the guy I was talking about earlier, Sadhguru, the guy from India, who's the spiritual international guy. He was giving a lecture at one of the top business schools in Chennai in India. And he pointed right at the faculty, and they all full of themselves and all that. And he said, look, there's a universe with 200 billion galaxies that we know about. There's this one galaxy with 100 billion stars. On the edge of that galaxy is a little solar system. There's a small little planet there. There's a country in that. And in that country, there's a little city. And in that city, there's a little building. And in that building, you're a big man.
That's right.
You're nothing. That's what he said. You're nothing. So let's get that straight, right? And that was a really good observation.
Absolutely, and I think this gets back to. So we'll take the the Christian aspect where Jesus is seen washing the feet of others, because he basically says the greatest among us should serve. And I think many great leaders do not want to lead, but wind up having to lead because no one else is capable at that time.
Yes.
Right. And so when I go, this is why I don't like the burden of having to leave mankind into the next generation, but there's just no one else. So I have to.
No, you guys know Simon Sinek, right? So I talk about Simon Sinek a lot. And Simon Sinek has done a lot of consulting with the military, with the Marines, and he talks about sometimes how ass backwards the business world is, where he says in the military you get a medal for sacrificing yourself so that your brothers may gain, right? In the business world, it's opposite, right? And he said that it's not so important what your neighbor or your competitor is doing. Are you better today than you were yesterday? I think you mentioned that, Jason. And earlier we were talking about, you go through this journey of life and you think you know something, then you realize you don't know shit. And then you realize, wait a minute, maybe my best contribution is just to serve others in a quiet, anonymous, humble way. And that's all there is. And you know what? That's good enough.
Well, you hit on something, and Jason's actually seen this from me when we were at Silent Circle. And I was like, I don't care what our competitors are doing. Like comparing yourself to your competitors is comparing yourself to like a sibling, like that's or I mean, probably not a sibling.
Ridiculous.
It's I want to compare myself against my future self and my past self. That's it. I don't care. But you will never, and I say this somewhat loosely, but yet I have never seen anyone not do this. People in sales and marketing always compare themselves to a peer group and those things. And I go, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Like, do you want to be, pushing the envelope? If you're comparing yourself to your competitors, then you're comparing yourself that to them being the leader, and you're always playing catch up.
That's right.
Yeah, it's coattail riding.
Right. I remember this because I was at many different, sales organizations as well. I'm like, this doesn't matter. And at Silent Circle, we were definitely there. I'm like, who cares?
It's irrelevant.
I don't
Like
care what
your-
Samsung is doing.
Cynic always makes a great point. He said, if you play the infinite game in business or in life, you're always, some days you'll be up, some days you'll be down, but you're playing an infinite game to try to get better every day. And if you do that, that's a great way to lead your life. You're learning, you're growing, you're expanding your soul almost.
And here's a great example. Apple, up until Steve Jobs died, did that. They did not care what their competitors did.
Correct.
This is what we're doing. And we're going to tell the consumers what they need before they ever need it. Like, we're going to tell them.
You know that famous speech where Steve Jobs introduced the iPad, and some guy was heckling from the crowd, and they said, "Have you done a market study?" And he said, "Market study? What's a market study?" He said, "This has never been invented before. People don't even know if they want it, but I know it's gonna be a thing, And he said, "I don't believe in market studies."
The iPad was the pivotal point in the enterprise of making data truly mobile.
That's right. Amen.
It was.
And I wish.
And I fucking hate the iPad, but
so the infinite game now. What's interesting about you can look at the infinite game from a business point of view, and try to get better as an organization. And great companies, the Hewlett Packards of the world, back in the day, and 3Ms and companies like that. But if you apply that to your personal life, and if you just get better every day, regardless of the noise around you and what other people are doing and what the neighbors are doing and what anybody's doing, what your friends, you just get better every day. And that means that you become the quiet assassin, I think.
So let's go back in
Rising
time.
tides raise ships.
Yeah. Well said.
Cheers.
So let's go back to the year 2008.
4 years ago almost.
Yeah. What if BlackBerry suffered from imposter syndrome?
Oh, fuck BlackBerry, dude. I'm getting butt fucked with that stock. Shut up.
I did well, but think about it. What if BlackBerry suffered from imposter syndrome in 2008? And I bring that point up because we mentioned Apple. In 2008 is truly when the smartphone, iPhone, Android started coming out. BlackBerry had a legit competitor.
Didn't they have 50% of the market at one point?
From the enterprise, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the beginning, their only competitor was the Palm Trio.
Yeah.
That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Did you guys ever watch Let's Make a Deal?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to tell me, I think I've got it here somewhere. I think I've got the original Palm Pilot, which I never gave up because I keep it with me as a reminder. This is how I used to.
It's not a reminder that you're old, is it?
When I rode the train on the LIR, I would use my commute time to take notes on what I learned that day.
Fuck yeah.
This is one of the greatest inventions ever. Of course, today it's like nothing, right? But this was something. It was a thing.
It was.
It was.
I had him.
So if you were,
I did too.
You got to pay me $50 for the original Palm Pilot.
Well, and it speaks to the dynamicism of our culture that's pretty much forgotten as a stepping stone between what we had and what we have now, which is marvelous. That whole segment of technology, like CDs and DVDs, right, are just forgotten.
It came with a stylus.
That's right, and it stuck in it, dude. That's right.
And still today, the Mac does not have a touchscreen. You have to have an iPad.
Listen, I'm here to tell you, we've debated about this a lot. And until recently, I was on board with you. But now I actually understand Steve Jobs' vision of why a Mac should never have a touchscreen. because
need
it's
to.
ergonomically
I want it.
bad.
I want to be able to flip it to be convertible, so I can use it as a notepad. I don't want to touch my screen. I want to make it to where I only have one device that I've got to carry outside of my phone instead of two. If I've got a Mac, then I got to carry some other fucking device.
It's called an iPad Pro, bro.
Oh, I have a Surface which I like.
still can't
but
VDI
as a
to it.
laptop, it's not as good as the Dell. I think
The Surface, yeah, the Dell's pretty good.
Dell's
But
pretty good.
I'm a Chromebook whore.
Oh,
I love my Chromebook.
Well, I'm here to tell you, man. In the next day or two, Microsoft should announce the Surface Duo 2, which is their foldable phone, and I might hop on that like a horny bunny.
Well, you know what? You will, and just like a horny bunny, you'll be off of it in a couple of hours.
Is this show governed by the rules of the FCC? I don't think so. It's
No.
not broadcast, right?
No,
No, man, this is the internet. You can say whatever the
not-
fuck you want.
we are not giving stock advice. Like,
Yeah, right.
If we're just
No,
a
I
bunch
mean,
of we're just a bunch of idiots. If you believe anything that we say, then
So that's a disclaimer. Do not believe anything that's said on this show.
hey, take it
Oh,
it for its own worth.
I'm not an idiot.
Your mileage may vary.
I mean, we're not necessarily idiots, but I mean, you should only really take the advice in our areas of expertise soundly. Everything else is an opinion.
So that
I'm
rule is all out, right? Then we're all disqualified.
Yeah.
I'm sharing experience and my observations therein.
So here's the reason why, going back to what you said, Dan, that imposter syndrome is not really a clinical affliction, because
Well, it's not in for me. There actually is a clinical.
oh yeah,
diagnosis.
well, I understand.
I'm just not that kind of doctor.
The reason is because so what we live in a society where drug companies make up diseases so they can sell certain drugs. So if there's a drug for this, I think then that becomes a real disease.
If let's say I was clinically diagnosed with this, I would not want to take any drug because I think it's what gives me my edge.
There you go.
As much as it bothers me, it also makes it to where I feel like I do a lot more than others in my given situation than what they would do, because they would be like, all right, I think I've done enough.
That's right.
I don't ever think I've done enough.
And that is an excellent observation. Andy Grove, who coined the phrase "only the paranoid survive," I think that kind of relates to this, right? That you have to have this paranoid edge that tells you that you're nothing, that you haven't done shit. You look at in the mirror, you say, "This is embarrassing. You got to do more."
Yeah. So I was having dinner with this cryptography legend, Phil Zimmerman, years ago, and Phil chose to not have. He was unwilling to do the drugs that he was prescribed for his ADD. And he said, he posited that I believe that people need to learn to accept it, and that it will eventually help them to solve more problems by working within that framework of this, so to speak, affliction. And, he was a very, and still is a very brilliant man when it comes to cryptography. However, he is a truest definition of, he is only a specialist. I don't consider him a generalist in any other aspect.
So let me ask you a question, bridging off actually what you said before that. And Ravi, you jump in.
And he's in like the technology like Hall of Fame. Like the guy legitimately is good. I mean, good.
Well,
like,
yeah.
Right.
And so Ravi, jump in, because you and I don't have the relationship that Dan and I have, because we just haven't spent that much time together. So I'm asking Dan this, but I'm actually asking all of us this, right? And so Dan, does your sense of imposter syndrome come from your childhood trauma? Because mine does.
And
Oh my God! This is
yeah, in many ways, yes.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, I can pinpoint it. One, I had as growing up, I had a massive overbite and was bullied and teased relentlessly all through high school, and then eventually I had to actually have surgery to correct my jaw. And on top of that, through sports, I was always taught that there's always someone better, and always give 100%, 100% of the time, because there's someone better than you. And if you do this, you'll beat people that are better than you because they know they're better and they'll take a play off. So the combination of those two things drive me probably in some ways to others in an unhealthy position. But
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, I mean, I know I can go too far, but it's not that. I mean, growing up, my dad would say, winning comes second only to breathing, and that's debatable.
Wow.
And so never give up, never
Yeah.
surrender, keep moving forward. I've pivoted that to always give 100%, 100% of the time, whatever that is. And you know what? If you lost, so what? Learn from it. If you won, so what? And I learned this probably in my senior year when I really took this, because, going back to Kipling, and I've mentioned this several times. I mean, I've probably read this poem, once a month, if not more, since my junior year in high school. And, he says, if you can treat triumph and disaster as the same two imposters. And and this is why today I have a ritual. If I had an amazing day, not this, like this is decent whiskey. It's like $45 a bottle. So, it's a drinking whiskey. If I had an amazing day, I'm bringing out the good bottle. I'm bringing out that same bottle if I had a really bad day. Because that bad day and having that 1 ounce, no matter if it was a good or bad, when that 1 ounce is gone, I will remember it no more. Because I'm only as good as what I do tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's my moment of, I will cheers myself and my success, and I will cry my wallows in my misery. But when
Nice.
that ounce is gone, I'm done.
Well, this is the difference between the art of war and the war of art, as Stephen Pressfield would argue it. And I think because of my childhood trauma, I've talked about this, but Ravi, I have an older brother that got hit by a car when we were really young.
Oh,
And through a situation, I mean, he's still alive, right? Don't misconstrue me here. But in that situation, there was a bit of traumatic injury to myself. And so it's taken me my adult life to reconcile that with my own persona. And so I think in part, when I conceive of myself having this sense of it being an imposter, it's manifested in the sense of not necessarily being good or not good enough. It's fulfilling this destiny that was set on this trajectory by that inflection moment that was out of my control, like you were talking about at the very beginning of the conversation, right? Him getting hit by that car was completely out of my control. I had nothing to do with it whatsoever. I was a victim of circumstance at best, but it set me on a course. And so now once I'm on that course, I have decisions to make. And those decisions are iterative, but compounding, like interest, right? And that's where like the perhaps cultural aspect of karma would come in, that the karma is compounding as I move forward through time. And so the best I can deal with that is, as I conceive it, fulfilling the destiny as I perceive it. And so that, as you expressed, as we get older, I think, particularly as men, there's something very tribal about this, right? As being men and being in charge of a tribe, that we're charged with dispensing wisdom to those coming up behind us, so that they don't have to follow through the same mistakes or the same traumas. And Kipling's apropos, it really is this notion of, I will pick you up through strength, or I'll pick you up through spirit. I don't know where I was going with that, man. You actually got me a little emotional, Dan.
No, this is really good stuff.
What I do.
Dan and I talked, I think even 10 months ago when we did our first podcast, we talked about the Tao Te Ching, and and it took me years to understand that. Many thanks to Wayne Dyer, whose interpretation I read several times, and the Tao Te Ching says something that it's very difficult for the Western mind to conceive or to grasp. Is the Tao does nothing yet leaves nothing undone. And when we're young and we're always judging ourselves by action. Oh, you got to learn this, go to school, do this, get a job, get promoted, do more, acquire more. And then you reach a point and you say, you know, if what you're doing is aligned with what you're thinking and what you're saying, like Gandhi used to say, what you say, what you think, what you do, if it's aligned, then it's no longer work. So in effect, you're doing nothing. You're being done. You're not doing anything. And there's a certain serenity that goes with that. And to your point, Jason, that we are definitely shaped by our childhood. We came, my family, I was 7 when I came to the U.S. and my dad is an immigrant. And he came as an engineer, 30 years old, 2 kids. And so we grew up as poor immigrants in Queens. And I think part of this imposter syndrome comes from the fact that we came to this great country with great opportunity. And how come, like I used to feel, how come I'm here? And I used to go back to India every summer, and there are millions of people out there that are better than me, but I get to live in America. Like I really have the imposter lottery. And that I think shaped me a little bit,
Well, I think that aspect is very similar to why, in some ways, I continue putting myself in positions that have to humble me. Like there's no other choice. So I've done many, many years of traditional Chinese martial arts. And so I'm currently a white belt in jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
Being humbled by people that I feel like I should not be humbled by. And that's my ego aspect. And that drive, I constantly put myself in those situations. And it does ground me. But I think that also probably contributes to my imposter syndrome in that given the situation, there are those that are much better than I. So I need to think about more situations to give myself the advantage of all of my experience that will give me a potentially better outcome, because they haven't thought about those things. Even though they may be better in a single situation, how can I force them? How can I put pressure on that situation to bend back to what I know I can achieve? And
and I think the takeaway from what we're kind of dancing around and painting out as a picture, as it were, is that I don't know that imposter syndrome is rare. And in fact, I think we all would agree that it's actually good. When you feel as if you're the imposter, that's when you're in that zone of proximal development. And that's where you should remain as long as your temperament's willing to withstand, because that's how you're going to maximally grow.
Jason,
actually, I'm not sure that it isn't rare.
I think it's common. Jason, you just reminded me of something. There's a book that I want to read. It's called The Beginner's Mind, I think.
It's a fucking great book.
And I haven't read it. But the idea is that you can retain your eternal spiritual youth and your zest learning if you're always take the approach as a beginner that you never feel you're an expert in anything. And I think
child's mind.
This is sort of an extension of the positive nature of imposter syndrome, meaning that you take on challenges, new challenges, learning new things. If you're childlike in your curiosity and you retain a beginner's mind throughout your life, you will, by definition, be an imposter in everything you do, but yet you will be energized by learning and growth forever.
That's right, because you're referring to the D.T. Suzuki book.
I think so.
Yeah. And so through that transcendence right? That enlightenment in a Zen Buddhist way, because that was his position. That to me is how you become the top of a hierarchy and then transcend all hierarchies. And that is an infinitesimal universal
It's really an
transcendence.
incredible concept. Years ago, I didn't understand what Khalil Gibran meant, but I did understand it after I worked for a few years. He said, "And when you reach the mountaintop, you shall begin to climb." Think about
That's right.
that.
That's right. I'm at the top, but I'm only halfway up.
That's right. You have a long way to go, but from depending on your perspective, somebody might think, "Oh, wow, this guy's at the mountaintop," but you think, "Well, I'm nothing."
Right. And that is the imposter's piece.
That's the imposter.
It is. And while I say imposter syndrome isn't rare, I still think if we were to break this down into 3 groups, 10% probably suffer from imposter syndrome. 10% just don't care. 10% don't suffer from imposter syndrome, and everyone else is in the middle.
70%.
I think, yeah. 70% is just, yeah, I'm just going to do what's necessary. But there's 10% that just don't care. Like there's 10%. I mean, so I go like there's like almost like a triangle in a way, but I think the majority of people just are more than fine being content.
The universe would tell you 80-20. That's a Pareto principle, and that governs all distributions.
Yeah.
So 80% of the people fall into the I don't care or I'm not aware bucket, and 20% are doing all the heavy lifting for everybody. And you know what? Fuck you. You should do it. If you're in that 20%, you better step up and slay that dragon.
That's very therapeutic, I must say.
Well, it's your destiny. Fulfill it.
Yeah. Life is not a spectator sport.
No, it's not, man. It's not. Well said. Well said.
And Jason and I have talked about this before as well. I don't believe life is about happiness.
No.
Happiness can be a result of your life's work, but that shouldn't be your goal. Like I really truly feel that the suffering that we incur upon this life is what makes greatness. And at certain times, happiness will result. And then, like, if I lived on a tropical island being served Mai Tais on the beach every day,
I'm not going to be happy with that.
For 3 days.
Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist monk who has lived in exile in France for many years. He's got to be like 85, I think.
Yeah, he's quite old.
Somebody asked him.
It's a quarter of the age of TK.
He said, you don't pursue happiness. He said, when you sit and you sip your cup of tea or you have your dinner, you must do it in a joyful, happy way. So happiness is what you bring to your life. You cannot steal it from somebody. You cannot try to grasp it like grasping air. You have to be happy in your situation and just be happy you're alive, and then bring that happiness to your environment and to your people and to your surroundings.
Yeah. Lift through spirit. Amen.
Which is why, I'm making spirits so I can not only be.
You're a spiritual guy.
How appropriate.
Yeah, it is interesting overall in that I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast because I really do like a lot of his guests, and he said that he does the podcast purely for selfish reasons and that he's just looking to grow. And if someone wants to tune in and listen, great, but it's not going to stop him from doing it. Even if he lost all of his followers, I'm looking to do this to grow.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how many people watch this. I feel like we've gotten something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're putting something positive out into the universe, and eventually that will resonate.
Hey, and maybe by the time we all retire, someone will care about all the stuff that we said, and then we get to people to quote us later in life like we're doing all these other greats.
Yeah, I won't rest until they build my statue.
I already have a couple. I don't know that I need another.
I mean, why not? Why stop, dude?
I didn't tell them to build it, and I'm not going to tell them to stop building them.
Right? I'm impartial. I don't know how you put up with this guy, Ravi.
I don't know either.
Well, and Ray New probably doesn't. Ray New probably can't answer the same thing.
So Dan, if you want to have a really crazy show, you got to put my sister on at the same time, and you will watch years and years of stuff come out.
Hey, I have invited her many times. She has an open invitation.
Tell her I dare her to be on the show with me. Tell her I dared her.
I will do that.
If she does not show up next Wednesday, she is the inferior sibling.
There you go.
Well, I'm not. Hold on. We may
Yeah,
not
write
have a
that
show.
down.
We may not
I'll
have
put
a show
that
next
challenge out.
Wednesday.
He's gonna call her now.
I will. I mean, I'll call. I don't have a problem calling her. I'm just not sure that next Wednesday I'm even. I think that next Wednesday is an off.
It's an off.
Is it? I don't fucking
Well,
know.
the next time
Anyone
we're
with-
scheduled, whenever I think we're
Oh
scheduled.
no,
in
next
October.
Wednesday is good. Next Wednesday is good. It's
There you go.
it's the 29th. The 30th is when I move. So I'm like, there won't be a place to do anything.
Well, I gotta tell you, man. By the way, speaking of missing episodes, just for the benefit of the spiritual universe, last Wednesday I wasn't available. I went to the only what's called Observant Masonic Lodge in North Carolina, and this is a Freemason Masonic lodge that follows the traditional English ritual.
Wow.
Dude, it was on another fucking level.
Amazing.
Yeah, man, that was something else. I'm going back next month for
Yeah.
another ceremony. Whoo-wee, dude. They do it right.
Nice.
Yeah, man, it was fantastic.
Very nice.
That's great. That's great. So, my friends, outside of us throwing the gauntlet down to Ray New, any other parting words?
Robbie?
You know, we just got to just be happy. Be happy.
Be ye brethren of all one mind, and shall the God of the earth bless you and dwell within you in peace.
My final parting word is for everyone, because there's so much out there you can do. Be
Build me
better.
a statue.
Be better tomorrow than you were yesterday.
Well
Hey,
said.
amen.
Well
Yeah,
said.
fuck yeah, dude. Incremental growth. That's what it's about.
Motivational.
Absolutely. My friends, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on yet again. I look forward to our next conversation. And have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
I always assume it's a pleasure for you to have me on.
It definitely is.
What he said.
You no longer need to assume.
Robbie, my friend, it's always good to see you.
Take care.
All right, my friends.
Thanks, man.
Have a great one. For everyone out there, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Catch you next
Happy
time.
Oktoberfest. Prost.
Roast.